Hello and welcome to the front lines. There's a new variant in town. We're talking about the variant of COVID-19. Whether the actual variant is already in India, we do not know, but it's very likely, considering that it's already reached about 20 countries, that it's already in India as well. It raises a couple of larger questions. One is, what is our capability to test now that we have to test even more to find this elusive new variant, or for that matter, even the existing Delta variant? Secondly, what is the quality of our data like, the genomic data which we generate once we do these tests or as we do these tests? And where can that take us in terms of our understanding and, of course, our public health response to a potential crisis if it does happen, which we obviously hope it does not happen. So, and finally, between speed, between the quality of the tests, the technology that's going into it, and the speed at which it's delivered, where do we stand in India in terms of the sheer capacity that we're building, and are we sufficiently equipped as we go ahead? To answer all these questions, I'm joined by Manisha Bhinge, Managing Director of Health Initiative Programs at the Rockefeller Foundation. Manisha is also the Managing Director of Global Networks and Partnerships with the Pandemic Prevention Institute beginning this year. And she has earlier worked with Tata Trusts and also with BRAC, and is a graduate of Harvard University with specializations in health economics and international development. I'm also joined by Dr. Taslimarif Saiyed, the CEO and director of CCAMP, an organization that puts together many of these projects. He's a neuroscientist and has received his PhD from the Max Planck Institute for Brain Research, Germany, and done his postdoctoral training at the University of California, San Francisco. Dr. Saiyed and Manisha, thank you very much for joining me. Manisha, can I begin with you first? Give us a broad sense. I mean, so there is a new variant that is now staring at us, knocking at our doors. How does this make the whole effort that you are trying to drive in terms of testing capacity more important and relevant as we speak today?
Variants are not news. We have been through this. India has been through this. We have had multiple variants come through over the past year. Repeatedly, testing is a frontline defense in terms of identifying new emerging pathogens as well as variants of those pathogens. So I think the work that we have done over the past year, the Indian government, sort of the private sector, research institutes and leading centers like, the one that Taslim is leading at CCAMP and where we partnered with, have been critical for that underlying capacity around diagnostics and testing to really be vigilant around these new sort of emerging variants and pathogens. There are two sort of there's a framing here to consider. The first is the RT-PCR technology, which has been the gold standard across the world and in India, which is where we leaned in heavily in the early part of last year and really brought up capabilities, manyfold. And I think Tasneem will be better placed to give the numbers around that. And self-sufficiency around that was important for a country as big as India, because as we saw with South Africa, an early consequence or an early response is around travel bans, and that is a standard containment issue. It's not surprising. We should have seen that coming. But what comes with it is other consequences, like import challenges, supply chain challenges. The commercial airlines carry a lot of the reagents and the cargo that is essential for the scientific efforts, and having not being reliant on that is a key consideration for a country the size of India, given that we have the capability. And what we found out last year through Taslim's work is that we had latent capacity to be a biotechnology hub for the world and for India. And using this opportunity to really unlock that potential was something that we used. And again, this is a critical first step to genomic sequence. If we don't have testing, we don't have a lot to sequence. And to your point around genomic data, I think our genomic data has increased. Again, with the INSAGOG Alliance, there's been, order of magnitude greater effort. Could we do it better? Could we do it faster? Yes, and efforts are underway, but we have made come leaps and bounds. What is missing, though, is a clear aggregation or alignment around adjacent information. So it's not enough just to have sequencing information. We need to understand the host behaviors. We need to understand how diseases are presenting themselves within those hosts. And that is the missing element that we need to work on, to have both clinical data, host data, and sequencing data, along with metadata in terms of what the geography is, what the testing technology is, to really get ahead of these variants of concern.
Right, and so, and when you say there are gaps, do you mean in the world in general, more so in countries like India?
The world in general is a good starting point. I think India, because of its size, scale, and inherent challenges and diversity, that issue tends to get amplified.
Right.
But across the world, it's very difficult to find data in a cohesive manner. We get piecemeal information, hence we get a piecemeal view of the emergence and transmissibility of these pathogens.
Right. Right. So, Dr. Saiyed, tell us, so you, as I understand, are working with over 130 manufacturers now and trying to create domestic capacity. I remember interviewing Dr. Velumani of Thyrocare a few months ago, and at the second wave peak. And at that point, there were a lot of questions about the RT-PCR test, which Manisha just referred to as a gold standard, and which is what he too said, because there were questions about at that time whether the tests were catching people or catching those who were infected and those who were actually carrying the virus. So tell us about what your effort has been, and where are we in terms of self-sufficiency, number one, and number two, retaining the gold standard and obviously being ready for newer variants that are coming in.
Oh, thanks, and it's a pleasure to be here. Thank you for having me. So if I may possibly begin, I think we all know that, last year when the COVID-19 pandemic struck, once we realized that India is not necessarily immune to it, immediately we realized that we don't have enough resources to actually fight it. And one of the most important, or rather the most important resource that we needed was testing. As we know, testing, so we can understand who is infected, so that they don't infect others and the spread can be prevented. And we didn't have enough testing capability in India, rather almost not there. And then we relied heavily on the imports and the imported kits from different parts of the world. But that was not enough. So we had two issues at that time. One issue was that we didn't have access to kits, and hence limited testing, and hence we can't fight the pandemic in terms of preventing spread and taking care of people early on so that they don't get into severity. Second was that the tests which were available were exorbitantly expensive, like almost 4,500 rupees or something per test, which is possibly some people can afford, but you can imagine people who are earning 300 rupees, 250 rupees a day. How are we thinking that they would be able to afford it? So India has had really a challenge right in front of us. At that time, while attempting to build possibilities of building it homegrown capacity for that, the Rockefeller Foundation supported our effort that is called indigenization of diagnostics, which is more or less like a platform effort where we build in collaborations with a few academic organizations and a very large number of companies to help them take their earlier capabilities for high quality reagent and kit manufacturing and a large scale development all in a way. So what we had done over a year and a half has been able to take each and every company, work on each and every reagent of those and get them to a level which is satisfactory to build actually a regulatory level reagent or a kit per se. Those are 130 odd companies or 150 companies that we are working with. And what has the result over a year and a half has been that we are actually almost around 900,000 to 1 million tests per day. RT-PCR tests, we have capacity to manufacture now. And this is from nothing to almost here. At the same time, we know that during this time, the cost for the RT-PCR, which was around 4,500, it is right now is almost become 250 rupees to 300 rupees in many places. And this is largely, due to the availability of larger RT-PCR tests now. The scale up has allowed that to happen, and even international kits which were exactly the same kits which were charged 4,500. They are
Right.
now around 500 rupees. So that's a humongous move that has happened. And while it is a, if I may just add, while this is a short-term response, it also prepared the nation right now for anything that would happen in future because capacity has been built. So that's a larger outcome that I see from there. And this has been supported by Rockefeller Foundation
Right.
throughout on that.
Right. So now in the between the test and the reagent, what is the component that you're actually able to bring down the cost of in terms of the how much? And secondly, or rather, secondly, or put differently, what is the most complex aspect or ingredient of these two elements, which if you import substitute or you substitute, you're able to crash the cost?
Yeah, so if I might just go a little bit in, as Manisha said, through this while building self-sufficiency, we also actually more or less build self-sufficiency for each and every reagent, be it oligos, enzymes like transcriptase, or even the other components of the kit, which is once what we called as a master mix. We have brought down cost of everything, which is total right now. The cost, real reagent cost, the kit cost really on the ground is below 100 rupees. While at the delivery end, it may become 250 or 300, but the cost of reagent is below 100, and that is absolutely unimaginable. Something that would be very useful not only for India, if we are to now support external other countries and to provide them high quality, affordable testing capability, this is where we are ready. This is where we can actually do global partnerships and ensure that the
Right.
countries which are affected could be supported.
Right. And I remember Dr. Velumani again telling me, I think it was almost 50-60% was the logistics cost because between the first and second wave, samples are flying all over the country. Because obviously you don't have labs, as many labs as you perhaps do today. Okay, Manisha, let me come back to you. So we're looking at a new variant now. So how confident are you about the work that you've been doing in terms of identifying, spotting, and responding or assessing this new variant and, of course, future variants as well?
Yeah, I think if you just juxtaposition this situation with what we had, say, last April, where we had again the new virus coming into the country. So again, this is an exported or rather imported in this case variant. The kind of testing technology and the speed of deployment of that testing technology at airports, at hotspots, contact tracing, these are muscles that we have built over the past year. And this technology exists. It exists at scale. It exists at price points that allow for sort of mass deployment in a very targeted manner. And the various authorities have guidance and protocol to really establish, and the algorithms needed to move from testing to contact tracing to what are the guidance, what happens when you have a positive, and now the sequencing protocols in place. So given the mechanisms that we have built over the past year and those that are coming into play right now, I think there is high confidence that we will find the variants quickly. We have the processes in place to manage it and contain it. The challenges remain, right? We do still have a vast group of people that are unvaccinated, and variants emerge because of transmission across unvaccinated people. So until we get a protection across the majority of the population, the threat remains and vulnerability remains. And with the country the size of India, the population and the density of India, it's always going to be much harder to manage after the fact than contain it at the onset. So quick answer is I have a high degree of confidence in our mechanisms. I think we still have challenges to manage, but also confidence in the innovation and creativity of our scientists.
Right. I don't want to pin either of you down on this, but could either of you give me a sense on, do we know, for instance, right now, how many variations we've already looked at? What is our speed of, let's say, identifying those variations? What's the library looking like? And what does that library tell us about what lies ahead?
I can
yeah, go ahead.
After you, Manisha, after you.
I think The global community has been tracking the variants across the board. The very fact that we are at Omicron, granted that we skipped mu and z for other reasons, we have done a very good job of managing and assessing variants. We have variants that are under monitoring, and there are a number of those which are visible on the WHO sites, as well as with the National Center for Disease Control in India across and our centers. We have variants of interest, which we are monitoring, and variants of concern. And again, Delta was a variant of concern, Omicron is a variant of concern. So given the nomenclature, given that we have categories that we are concurrently tracking, there is established libraries that are publicly available. And what is something to celebrate is the global coordination across scientists and across countries to really keep an eye on this particular pathogen and its variants.
Okay. Dr. Saiyed, go ahead.
No, I think Manisha has very rightly pointed out the effort which is global in terms of detecting these variations early and possibly work with other scientists and public health experts to assess those variants and how they are increasing either transmission or possibly the severity of the disease, and then work around to bring down the spread of it and so on. I think genomics sequencing and early genomic sequencing and prospective early genomic sequencing allows that to happen. And I think many countries, including India, needs to keep building this capability and do it in multiple cities, not only metros and so on, but we'll have to do it in multiple cities. So even if it is happening in other cities, we can pick them early and see if suddenly hotspots are emerging of variants, and track them and then bring in the public health policy to address that.
Right. Okay. As we look ahead, and when I say look ahead, it literally means maybe the next few weeks, as scientists say they are trying to find out what really this virus can do or what damage it can cause, and of course beyond that. So tell us about what are the challenges and tasks you're seeing ahead. And Manisha, can I go first with you?
Yeah, I mean, there is a lot of information that we still need about this variant. We have basic sequencing information, and I'll come back to an earlier point I made around having the infrastructure and the ability to get associated information about a sample. So again, what is the clinical data? What is the host representation? What is the epidemiological data? How does one get this information in a coherent, consistent fashion across cities, across facilities, so that we are not chasing the information. We have it, we can do the analysis and have a measured and informed assessment of either the transmissibility, the immune escape, as well as the virulence of emerging variants. So we have the pieces. I think the challenge and the opportunity is putting it all together in a cohesive manner across the country, so we know not only where the variants are, but how it is behaving across and moving across populations in a timely and informed manner.
Okay, Dr. Saiyed? Oh, absolutely. I'll just add very briefly to Manisha's points. As we go further, we do know that there would be, mutations that would emerge. That's how the game is played, and slowly and steadily, as the mutations would happen, possibly the transmission and all will go down. But as we can't possibly, lower our guard, what we need is a national and a global effort, a central effort to identify and control the variants of concerns early on. I think it will require a collective, concentrated effort for early identification and controlling of VOCs, which is very, very crucial. Many times there has been a delay, and I think a collective effort and something that has been happening in many countries would be the right way to go forward.
Right. So we've talked about scale and we've talked about cost and the advances that we've made on that count in India. Let me ask you about another factor, that's speed. And two kind of instances. One is the United States is likely to say, it's only reported that it'll ask for a 24-hour window for submitting your sample and getting a response. Earlier it used to be 72 hours. Second, when you now land in many airports in India, and this is of course again an overnight development, you have to get an RT-PCR test at the airport and wait for the result, and then only can you leave. Cities like Mumbai or cities within Maharashtra are saying that you have to also go in for an institutional quarantine and get tested many times. Now, I don't know whether that will stick or not stick because it's not in consonance with the rest of the country. But however, the on-site testing for international arrivals stands, and the long waits. So time is another factor. How do you see that playing out, Dr. Saiyed?
I think in terms of, it's very dynamic. It's very, very dynamic. We all know the time taken by the virus to show up symptoms or even enough concentration that could be tested. And that's why people talk about 72 hours, because upon infection, it has to be enough load in an individual that it will be picked up. And that's what the larger game is. Now, as the RT-PCR becomes not 48 hours, not 24 hours, but 3-hour or 2-hour turnaround time, the situation allows people to say that, why don't you test it, let the results come out and do that. In some countries, at the same time, people have been actually requested to even, if I'm not wrong, in UK, the travelers are requested to check themselves after 6 or 7 days and upload results. That clearly shows that the system there believes that there might be still a mistake, even 3 hours or 4 hours or 4 days, that you're not being picked up, and that may develop it later on once you arrive. So it's all combination of different things, but currently people are looking at best 5 days. After the exposure, you would have enough, the viral load that could be picked up. And if you actually at that point of time you are not having enough symptoms, that might be asymptomatic, or maybe possibly no viral load that goes below the threshold, which would not affect you, and your body will take care of on its own. So right. It's as you rightly said, it's a combination of technology, the viral dynamics, and the human host response that matters here together.
Right, but are you also saying that the turnaround time for tests? I submit a sample now, and how long will it take for me to get a response? Given the fact that I could be held up at various places which will not allow me to either leave or enter till I have a result, which obviously should be negative before proceeding.
Yeah, so turnaround time also has come down drastically. We used to have 48 hours, as you remember, that you would come home and wait for SMS to arrive and so on. Right now, in many technologies, like normal path labs are giving in a few hours, and specialized machines like Abbott and all have been able to do it in half an hour. So that is absolutely, lightning speed that they have been able to pick that. And that allows immediate outcome of the test, and let a lot of these procedures and possibly the institutional quarantines that could be avoided, because if they are negative, they could be allowed to, move forward for their travel reasons and so on.
Right. Manisha, last word on speed. I mean, any thoughts on that before we go?
Yes, a quick one. I mean, I think this is where innovation and automation is going to be game changing, because the speed and the turnaround times have been largely because, transportation costs, labor intensive processes, discretionary processes. So as Taslim said, antigen RDTs, CRISPR-based technologies, decentralized sequencing, the use of SNP assays with PCR technologies, all take the analysis down to the front lines. And I think the more we invest and build out that decentralized technology, the faster we are going to be in terms of getting our results. And I think that's where the world is headed.
Right. Thank you for that. Hopefully things will be faster, but hopefully what we will also not find is more positive cases of COVID. But obviously we'll have to continue testing, and life will be somewhat similar to what it is today and not worse, or not like what it was a few months ago, at least in India. On that note, Dr. Saiyed and Manisha, thank you so much for joining me.
Thank you, Govind.